You ever have a neighbor who treats your yard like a sidewalk? I mean, not once or twice every single day, like a shortcut ordained by the HOA gods, and after a while, it gets under your skin so deep you can taste it. That's how it started for me, right there on Maple Ridge, with Mrs. Linton cutting diagonally across my front lawn like she owned the property, heels crunching, eyes fixed on whatever errands ran through her head. I tried being polite, a little garden sign, a smile, a friendly wave, and that only made it worse, like my manners were permission. So yeah, this is how small things spiral, and how a man who never wanted drama ended up making his lawn the biggest scene on the street. My name's Sam Harper. I like my lawn the way my grandma taught me to like things: neat edges, a few wildflowers for the bees, the kind of yard that makes you slow down when you pull into your driveway. Mrs. Linton had a thing for cutting corners. Not metaphorically, physically. She walked a straight line from her mailbox to the sidewalk across my grass, day after day, trampling the tiny beds I'd planted for months. The first few times I thought nothing of it. The fifth time I found one of my potted plants knocked over and used as a step, I left a polite note. She laughed it off at the next HOA meeting and called my little fence theatrical. That's when the grievance changed from irritating to personal. The HOA was a second antagonist in the story, distant in title, up close in power. They loved their bylaws and loved enforcing them more, mostly when it gave them something to wield. I reported the repeated trespass, submitted the photos, the dates, the polite letters, and got back tight. Bureaucratic replies: "We appreciate your concern, and we recommend de-escalation." Their idea of de-escalation was sending me a warning for unapproved lawn fixtures after I put up a low decorative border to protect my plantings. Imagine that. My fence was a violation, while Mrs. Linton's path of destruction was an inconvenience. The message was clear: follow the rules unless you're important. That kind of thing makes you measure your options a different way. I'm not proud of how I let my anger sit and warm. I started staying up later, planning little non-harmful surprises that would make the point without crossing some invisible moral line I couldn't stomach to cross. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Kids played nearby. Neighbors had dogs. There was a church on the corner, so safety was my first rule. My second rule was that it had to be unmistakable. If you're going to call someone out, make sure they can't deny it. So I did the quiet work. Nights of laying sod, repairing the beaten path with mulch, replanting perennials. I filmed the progress, not to gloat, but to have a record. Then I waited for the universe to make its move. The morning came on a blue-silver dawn. Mrs. Linton was late, as usual, a small mercy. I stood on my porch with coffee cooling in my hands, watching the street like a sentry. When she appeared, it was cinematic, scarf wrapped like a flag, sunglasses too big for early light, a little dog prancing beside her. She walked her line like a ritual, right through the heart of the beds. Only this time, as she hit the soft center of my garden, a bloom of color puffed gently around her ankles, magenta at first, then a whisper of teal, and she froze, eyes wide like she'd been drawn into a movie. Phones came out from hedges. Curtains twitched in houses that had been watching all along. It was the kind of absurd, public spectacle that settles in your bones. She spun, furious, and for the first time I saw her without the mask of entitlement, just a person, red-faced, yelling, "What on earth is wrong with you?" Her voice was shrill and theatrical, perfect for the HOA newsletter. I walked down the path, palms open, because I'd promised myself I wouldn't escalate into name-calling or violence. Up close, her perfume hit like a warning sign, and she tried to demand an apology, demanded I remove my nuisance fixtures. I told her I'd taken care of the beds, that the color was harmless, washed out in a day, and I didn't apologize. She called me childish. I called her a bully. She called the HOA. I called my brother, who had the decency to laugh at the whole thing and say, "You really made a point, Sam." The neighborhood split in real time. Some of the elderly neighbors clucked and tooted, others peered with conspiratorial grins. The HOA sent a terse email promising fines if unauthorized public disturbances continued. The police came by later that afternoon and were very careful and very polite. No arrests, no citations, just a recommendation that we all seek civil solutions. The real cost, as it turned out, wasn't legal at first, it was social. Mrs. Linton doubled down, telling anyone who would listen that I'd humiliated her, that I'd crossed a line. She organized volunteers to reroute foot traffic, planted a row of potted geraniums like siege works, and posted pictures in the HOA group with captions that read like accusations. It was petty theater, but it burned. Week 2 was worse. The color hit the internet. A neighbor had uploaded shaky footage, and suddenly strangers were commenting beneath our quiet cul-de-sacs photo stream. People took sides with the kind of zeal usually reserved for sports teams. Some praised my creative boundary setting. Others lectured about vigilantism. A few suggested that I'd provoked safety issues. I watched the comments with a strange detachment. The yard had become a stage, and everyone in town had an opinion, but none of them had to stand where I stood when I mowed at dusk and watched for the heavy tread of deliberate entitlement. It's easy to romanticize rebellion when you win. For a while I felt like a local folk hero, the guy who stood up to the HOA machine, and the self-appointed queen who couldn't be bothered to use a sidewalk. But the high has a hangover. Fines crept in for alterations to visible landscaping. And for the cost of the cleanup we'd been careful to do every morning. The HOA's lawyers sent letters with the kind of calm, surgical menace that makes you realize institutions don't get tired, they invest. There was also the human cost. Morning runs felt like war patrols. Old friends who wanted neutrality stopped inviting me to barbecues. And once, a kid from down the street got his shoes bright blue after playing too close. He laughed it off. I did not. The line between protest and harm is thinner than you think, and once you cross it, someone will pay, even if it's only your reputation. In the end, I made a choice I hadn't expected to make. One night, I walked the beds with a bag and a flashlight and removed the last of the things that had turned my front lawn into a battleground. I messaged the HOA president with a note that said I'd taken everything down and that I hoped we could find a better way to settle disputes. It was humbling not because I was wrong to stand up, but because I finally saw how much noise it made to do so. Mrs. Linton stopped taking the shortcut the next week. Sometimes she waved when she passed. Once, she tipped her hat. Civility returned, but it was quieter, strained, like a conversation after an argument where both people are counting the cost. So what did I learn? That boundaries matter, and that people will take them differently. That institutions will privilege order over fairness, sometimes accidentally, sometimes not. That theatrical resistance is satisfying for a while, but it can also become a chain that binds twice as tight as the thing you protested. I learned to tend my lawn for the sake of the plants and for the habit of doing something well, not for the chance to make a point. And I learned to pick my fights not because surrender is noble, but because victory sometimes looks like isolation. If you watch this and think I was right, tell me why. If you think I went too far, tell me where I crossed the line. I want the hot takes. Did I defend my home? Or did I stage a spectacle at the expense of my community? Drop a comment, share your story about a neighbor who pushed too far, and tell me what you would have done. If you've ever had an HOA moment, I want to hear it, the messy ones, the quiet ones, the ones that taught you something.